5.5 minutes after 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago as we move into the second hour of our show on this Monday. Good of you to be with us. Well, it's been 1 week since 3 of the country's major trade union umbrella organizations held a motorcade in Scarborough, Tobago. They hosted the event under the banner Unite to Fight. As they say, government has ignored several of their concerns, which is not in the best interest of working people. Well, we're going to be joined by 3 representatives now. We hope to be joined in a short while by Joseph Remy, who is the president of FITAN. We also have with us Antonia Tika de Freitas, who's with us already, president of TUTA, of course, representing JTUM, the Joint Trade Union Movement, for our discussion this morning. And also with us is Michael Aniset, president of the SWWTU, but in his capacity here as NATOC General Secretary. And as I said, we hope to be joined by Joseph Remy in a short while, representing FITAN. He should be part of our Zoom discussion in a short while. If I could start with Ms. Tika de Freitas. Just give us a sense, Ms. Tika de Freitas, as to why Tobago. Not that there's anything wrong with having anything into, because Tobago is part of Trinidad and Tobago. But is this also a political statement, given that we have a deadlock in Tobago, that Watson Duke, a member of the trade union movement like yourself, is campaigning against the PNM? Isn't it obvious that there's a political intonation to the presence in Tobago last week? Good morning to you, Ms. Tika de Freitas.
Good morning, Fazia. Good morning to my comrades, and good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. And I would want to say categorically and definitively, no, there was no political dimension. As a matter of fact, even though certain politicians in Tobago alluded to that, the JTUM fighter NATOC, they put out a release indicating, just as you said, Unite to Fight was the focus. Tobago was chosen to start because too often we put Tobago at the tail end of our activities. And so you will notice from the motorcade, there was the focus on the union aspect. There was a focus on representing people's issues, representing workers' rights, or rights of workers which had been infringed upon. Good. So as we continue the Unite to Fight campaign, JTUM, NATOC, FITAN, and TUTA as well, we will continue to adopt an apolitical stance, because this is not about politics, party politics. This is about representing those who are vulnerable and voiceless in society. So at that point, we want to say, no, it was not political.
And because we have someone with a barking dog in the background, I don't know if it's Mr. Aniset or Mr. Remy, but just for the purposes of our discussion, when you finish, make your comment, if you could mute the mic so we could probably cut it off, because it can be a distraction as well. But let me go to Mr. Aniset as to why now? This is the obvious question. Why now have this? Because the situation as far as the union movement and the challenges to workers and the working class have been ongoing. So why now? And the reason, again, I make this point, Mr. Aniset, is that I'm looking at the Express reporting of it last Monday. And the reporting from Elizabeth Williams started by saying, and I quote, "The enemy of the people is the PNM, led by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley." So said NATOC President Watson Duke, who has called for a fresh national election. So notwithstanding what Ms. Tika de Freitas has pointed out, and I take her point, isn't it obvious that this is being taken on board by your colleague Watson Duke as election campaigning as well, Mr. Aniset?
You're asking me to speak for Watson Duke.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're asking me to speak for Watson Duke, which I cannot speak for. All right, what I can speak to is the decision that has been taken by the federations, which is clear, which is precise, which deals with the issues that are affecting the working class and the workers, the voiceless, the disadvantaged in our society. And we believe, as the federations, we have a responsibility to speak up in defense of these groups of disadvantaged workers, the working class, and all the other workers who are not represented in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think that is a sacred responsibility that the trade union movement we have. And we would have articulated that in our discourse through the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so one has to understand that an individual statement is not a reflection of what the federations decided to do. And I just want to add that there was a motorcade in Trinidad and Tobago by the three federations with the banner Unite to Fight. So this in Tobago, the motorcade is a continuation of a concerted effort on the part of the federations to educate and put the facts on the table so that workers and generally the public will understand what are the real issues affecting Trinidad and Tobago. And we see that as our sacred responsibility. Unite to fight against retrenchment, unite to fight against unilateralism, unite to fight for proper governance, and I can go on, ethical behavior, everything that you want to speak of, and a better economy for Tobago and Trinidad. That's the whole concept.
Let me bring in Joseph Remy. And first of all, let me just check and make sure that he is hearing us loud and clear, and we can hear him, more importantly, loud and clear as well. Mr. Remy, are you there with us?
Yes, Faz. Good morning to everyone. I'm hearing you guys now.
Right, all right. Good of you to be with us as well this morning. And the question, if I could ask you, Mr. Remy, why now? Because the issue, for example, of the closure of the refinery that occurred, end of 2018? And it seemed to be an excellent political strategy by the PNM because it kept one of the major unions, the OWT, was silent for a long time. So isn't this late in the game for the trade union movement to be galvanizing at this stage?
Fazzy, it's never too late to educate and edify working class people about their rights and their responsibilities. We would have been on the road. You remember the march from south to Port of Spain with respect to the Petrosian closure. So it is not fair to say that nothing was done when the issue of Petrosian closure took place. The trade union movement would have been at the forefront, championing that cause, and there was a united effort, with all the federations involved, to highlight the case with respect to Petrosian. Notwithstanding those efforts, the government went ahead with their political objective and agenda, and they are now feeling the brunt of the fallout from that particularly uninformed and ill-informed decision. So now it is never too late, or it is never the wrong time to continue to provide education and information to workers. And we believe now more than ever, we are 1 year and some months into a pandemic, and we are seeing the impact it is having on workers, particularly, those are the vulnerable and the lower end of the working class scale. And we believe now more than ever, it is appropriate for the trade union movement to coalesce around each other, each federation coalesce around each other in a united effort to bring the information to the forefront so we could save jobs. And by saving jobs, we could save lives and save livelihoods and build back the economy. Our economy is really floundering, and we believe we have a responsibility to get involved and provide our input into what we believe should be the right way to go about this, the transformation that is taking place based on the pandemic, and also pre-pandemic, what would have been the economic fallout we were having from the Petrosian closure and the retrenchment at TSTT and all the mass retrenchment that would have took place in the past. So we believe we are on target in terms of timing, and we will continue to do what we have to do to educate our workers.
And therefore, Mrs. Stickett,
I just want to add...
Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
What Gov'T Remy put. He spoke about the economic fallout and the state of the economy and the impact on the workers. I want to remind us and inform those of us who may not know that the trade union movement and the credit union movement came out of the same kind of humble beginnings, that of representing the working class and seeking the interests of the working class. Now is the time for these two movements, and the trade union movement has been in the vanguard of that, as my comrades have said over the last few months. Now is the time for these two movements to really and truly show their force in terms of representation of workers. We have credit unions operating like banks. Our workers are disenfranchised. We have situations where unilateral decisions to retrench workers at TDC, you mentioned Petrotrin, at ArcelorMittal and other entities have taken place. And these workers, our brothers and sisters, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, do not experience the kind of economic and financial stability that others experience in our country. The pandemic has worsened that situation. So now is definitely the time for us to deal with that. And that is one of the reasons, as we will come to in further in the discussion, that is one of the major reasons that the trade union federations pulled out of the NTAC, because we did not believe that the rights of workers were being upheld, that anything was being done in the interest of the working class at that NTAC.
And therefore, Mr. Anisad, what unite to fight in what way? What do you want to be happening now? Because the government has whether you believe them or not, they say another lockdown and there's no money to help anybody. Pandemic is still here, cases are rising, so clearly we're in a very difficult situation. What is it that this unite to fight? What do you want at this stage, Mr. Anisad?
Okay, let me make it crystal clear that the issue of consultation, and when I say consultation, I mean genuine consultation, is not on the cards at all. We cannot continue a society where decisions are taken that affect the working class, the trade unions, the workers, the communities, and they are not genuinely involved in that decision-making process. And that is why we talk about unilateralism. And the government is not omnipotent. The government is not all-powerful. Cabinet was not mandated by the people to take some of the decisions that they are taking. How do we justify in Trinidad and Tobago that there is a legitimate negotiated settlement on the port of Port of Spain for port workers in Port of Spain and Tobago, and for NIB, and the government, rather than engaging with the trade union movement, which is their responsibility under the ILO, under the Convention of the Right to Collective Agreement, and discuss issues, the government goes on TV or a political platform or a press release and say we cannot give that wage increases. We're not going to give anybody any wage increases because the economy is suffering. But within the same breath, we see thousands and millions of dollars are being spent on Tobago. We see pronouncements of roads to be extended, and we see areas where the road needs to be fixed and this is not being fixed. So that the trade union is forging a new kind of culture, a new kind of thinking where tripartitism, where consultation in the true meaning is part of how we transition our society to a society where the people who the decisions are affected are involved in the process of making those decisions, are informed and are allowed to discuss those issues. Let me give you another example. Yes, the government set up a cabinet-appointed committee to look at WASA, and let me make it clear to the public that the trade union movement wants a better public utilities, not only in WASA, right through Trinidad and Tobago, because it is our responsibility and it is in the interest of the citizenry to have good working public utilities. But what the government do, they set up a committee. They haven't informed the union. The union wasn't part of it. And they leak certain reports to the public to marginalize and bastardize the trade union movement. That is a reality. And those are tricks that we have seen being used all over the world. And the government must understand as a government that no decision in no society will be taken unless the major players and stakeholders are involved in it, because those decisions eventually will renown, right, to the downfall of your economy. And that's a historical fact. So those are the things that the trade union movement wants to talk about. We want genuine dialogue, genuine engagement. We have to change this society and build a better society.
Okay, Ms.
And
Anisette, if
for
you'd
those
allow...
who don't want to believe it, we cannot have a society where only a certain few people benefits and the majority are left to fight for these crumbs. That is not a society, that is not democracy, and that is why we will continue to say we must unite to fight.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Remy into the discussion. But okay, how do you hope to, because now, as Ms. Tikadifrit has been giving the justification why there was the withdrawal from the NTAC, how do you hope to achieve this, Mr. Remy, if it is that you are not at the table, which we are told is the proper forum for that sort of dialogue? How do you hope to achieve this then? Mr. Remy?
By law and by principle, the proper principle of engagement, the trade union movement is recognized as the legitimate body to represent the interests of the workers in Trinidad and Tobago. So you don't have to have an NTAC for the government to engage the trade union movement. NTAC is a formal process by which we engage in tripartism. But outside of NTAC, it does not mean that the government can't engage or the employer cannot engage with the trade union movement. They have a legitimate right to. Because once you have trade union representation, remember the government is an employer. And by the fact that they're an employer, they have an obligation to meet and treat in accordance with the provisions of the Industrial Relations Act, Section 14. And they must meet and treat in good faith. So they have to meet despite the fact that we are outside of NTAC. But I want to just elaborate on it because I've been part of NTAC. You know, we understood, and Comrade Anisette could attest, we made several attempts to discuss some burning issues that would have been affecting workers. The issue of Petrochin was never discussed at NTAC. The issue at TSTT was never discussed at NTAC. We have WASA, and I heard the minister this morning talking about how much managers he would like to have. That is the problem we are having. We're having an intervention at a level without giving the process the time to unfold. And if you are engaged in a transformation of an entity, you start with an answer already. So you are saying you want X amount of managers. That means you are pushing the board and whatever team you have in place to come up with that answer. And that is not the right way that we engage. You know, all we are saying is let us engage in meaningful discussion, following the protocols and procedures and practices established by the ILO for proper tripartism. And that is why we were engaged at NTAC. We were engaged because we believe in the principles that the ILO announced and pronounced, and the government subscribed to the ILO conventions. And as such, we believe meaningful engagements mean let us talk open and frank. We don't have to agree on everything, but the most important thing is that there is meaningful engagement with an intent to provide a solution at the end of the day.
And in the time that we have available, I just want to get the sense from the three of you all. If the government does not respond in the way that you would like, what next? Ms. Tikadifrit, if I could start with you, because the government, as I said, we had the finance minister talking about NIB, but he came up with the figure 7 billion, and it worked effectively. The population was 7 billion, not realizing that it was an expansion of the numbers for a particular reason. So we see what the government's perspective is. So if they are not willing to meet the demands of the trade union movement, the unified trade union movement in this regard, to have meaningful dialogue, as your colleague just mentioned, what happens next, Mrs. Tikadifrit?
See, from JTEM's perspective, Unite to Fight is, as was said before, about empowerment and informing the working class of their rights and responsibilities. JTEM, for example, took the opportunity to expand Unite to Fight to involving our women, ensuring our women's rights are upheld, because Trinidad and Tobago has not yet ratified the ILO Conventions 189 and 190 that deal with domestic workers and violence against women in the workplace. When we consider the fact that Trinidad and Tobago has entered into agreements with the ILO Conventions, but we have not ratified some, we are not ensuring that our laws reflect such agreements and such positions. We believe as JTEM, now is the time for us to let our members know, to let the workers know, there are other avenues that can be followed to address workers' issues. So the federations will continue their discussion and their planning, and we will leave it up to the government to invite the federations, not to bully the federations, to invite the federations to dialogue. If they don't, the ball is in their court for zero. JTL will say, if they don't, well, then we will have to exercise our power as the people.
And what does that mean, Michael Anisset, exercising the power of the people? Is that about strike action? Is that about go slow? Is that about time for rest and reflection, threatening to shut down the country and so on, Mr. Anisset?
No, those measures that you mentioned, measures in the armory of the trade union movement, and it's not the be it and end it all of our approach in this matter. Unite to fight, let me make it clear again, is a different approach. It's an adaptability given what is happening, given the fact of Gov'T and all the other misrepresentations. And you made a point, you made a fundamental point that the Minister of Finance, and it's not the first time, misled the general public into believing that the NIB matter was $7 billion, which was misleading. The very said minister went on to mislead the very public by saying that the industrial court had agreed with the with the NP collective agreement, again, which was misleading. The very minister is refusing to honor the rights of a collective agreement which has been acquiesced to and agreed to between the Port Authority Management and Board and the union on behalf of port workers and also NIB. So I am just showing you a level of, I don't want to use the word on TV, but I will say that a level of distrust that is building in the minds of the workers, because workers have sense too. Workers are beginning to understand what is happening, and workers have to be part of what is going on in this society. And as I speak to you, goods and services, notwithstanding the pandemic, is going on, and the government as a government has taken a decision unilaterally not to give no wage increases to government employees. Those are the realities. And I am saying that the question of knowledge, informing workers and putting the facts of the table is where we are going. It is a new approach, because an educated workforce, an educated working class, an educated community that has all the facts before them, it will translate into the fact that you cannot fool them. And when you cannot fool your community and your society, then you're going to see the changes. And we believe, we as the trade union movement, we as workers, we as the voiceless must demand the kind of society that we want. And this is the conversation that we have started in Trinidad and Tobago for a better society for everybody. Unite to fight, comrades. Unite to fight.
Let me finish up with Joseph Remy. And Mr. Anisset referenced about the threat to public servants and so on. But public servants weren't working for months with full pay, when other people were without jobs and losing their jobs and can't get back their jobs and so on. So Mr. Remy, as callous as it may sound, why should the general public have sympathy with public workers when they were the beneficiaries at the height of the lockdown, and ordinary people in the private sector were suffering greatly?
Farzan, let me say once again that I am surprised that you are sounding like Minister Imbert. That is a fallacy. The public servants, you're making it sound like if the public servants are feeding off the largest of the state. We were in a pandemic. At the NTAC, we were discussing the whole issue of pandemic leave and the whole policy for leave during the pandemic. If you could recall, I'd like to ask you, what has happened to that policy prescription that the government was discussing? It has fell to naught. And those are some of the concerns we would have been having. So we would have been in a position to have a policy to guide what would have happened to the public servants during the period that they were home during the pandemic. We were engaged in those discussions, and it has reached to nothing, because it went to the office of the CPO and the Minister of Labor, and we have heard nothing of it since then. So it is wrong to say that public servants would have been feeding off the largest of the state. Despite that, we have to be mindful of the fact that while there may be good and bad in every employment category, The public service is what has carried this country for years, We have been riding on the back of the public servants. Yes, there are some that we may feel that are not productive, and I am very honest and open in those discussions. But to label the public service as one that has not produced, we as a country are where we are because we have a public service that has continued to work, despite the fact that they may not be where they're supposed to be in terms of the compensation structure. And I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to say that it is not just the government as an employer, it is the other employers, the business class that we are talking about. You know what I mean? We are seeing a deliberate attempt, and they normally take lead from the government, to use the pandemic as a means of engaging in downsizing. They use all different words in layoffs and all the different things. And we are saying, now is not the time to do it unilaterally. Let us engage, and the comrade said it, let us engage in discussions, and we may come up with some solutions that would work in the best interest of everyone first. This is a different approach from the federations. And Unite to Fight, people take the interpretation of fight to mean a physical combat. We are going on an intellectual combat, a combat that we believe when we reach to the heart and minds of the working class, then they will use all the arsenal in the trade union armory to deal with their issues and move the thing forward in a meaningful and productive way. And that is why we say Unite to Fight through education, through edification, and through proper information, and through engaging in a type of collaboration with the communities. We have to reach out to the communities and talk to them and let them know exactly how this thing has impacted upon them, coalesce them around the movement, and then we will see a difference in the society. And that is what the government and all the authorities need, to jolt them from their comfort zone and to engage in discussion that will bring about a different kind of standard of living for the working class in Trinidad and Tobago.
Joseph Remy, Michael
Additionally,
Anderson.
remember that teachers have been working from March 16th
right.
tirelessly, right, under very extreme conditions affecting their work-life balance. Teachers who are working on 2014 salaries. So we really and truly have a problem with the perception that public servants, which include teachers, have been home and drawing their salary. That is not true. That really is not true, because at this point in time, we are concerned about what's happening in the education system. JTAM, all the trade unions, we are concerned about that. So Unite to Fight will also assist us in ensuring that the other institutions within the country, education, etc., would be improved, given the fact that you will have meaningful social dialogue. So we look forward to that.
Antonia Tika de Freitas,
And just let me
Michael
add quickly.
Time is going by, Mr. Anderson. I really...
Quickly, I just want to make a fundamental point.
Quickly.
Impression is conveyed, government paid public service, but I asked the question in the public domain. Did government fund private enterprise during the COVID period? Did government release monies for other parties in order for the economy to keep going? Was it only the public servants? And I will leave that question for the public to answer.
And hopefully we'll have another opportunity with the three of you all, or maybe other representatives, to discuss that even further. Thank you very much for taking the time. We've run over just a little bit, but it's very important that they were able to develop the points that they wanted to make as well. Antonia Tika de Freitas, Michael Anisette, and Joseph Remy. As we go to the break at 7:34, here are some images from viewer Gregory Medina. As we go to that break, the first is of what used to be known as Stallmeyer's Castle, is now Castle Kalani. The other he calls the calming beauty of our botanical gardens, and the final one is captured sanctuary in the hollows. Beautiful images indeed of that part of the Queen's Park Savannah around the Magnificent Seven and that general area. We'll be right back.
Life is what you make